Welcome back. Now incrementalists appeal to the emergency argument relating to abortion strategy. 1. In an emergency, one ought to save as many lives as possible. 2. The abortion license is an emergency. 3. So legislators ought to vote in a way that saves as many preborn babies as possible. 4. Sometimes a restrictive proposal that excludes the disabled from protection is a means for saving as many preborn babies as possible. 5. So legislators ought to vote for such a proposal.
Indeed, John Finnis holds that there is a duty to do so.
But is the emergency argument sound?
Colin Harter reminds us of the old axiom, women and children first. Look first to the vulnerable. But the most vulnerable in our context are the disabled, expressly excluded because some hold them of less value. Britain, for example, aborts over 90% of its unborn babies with spina bifida or Down syndrome. There is also a distinction between rescuing lives in an emergency for which one is not responsible and rescuing lives in an emergency for which one is wholly or in part responsible. Natural disasters give rise to emergencies, but rescuers can neither enact nor appeal the laws of nature. Protest is pointless, nor are rescuers responsible for emergencies which others, with whom they have no bond, cause by negligence or with malice.
Yet, democratic legislatures, acting in concert, do enact and repeal laws. 2. Protest legislative wrongs can be efficacious, sometimes more so than reform from within.
Sustained resistance and civil disobedience can overturn a regime that forsakes those for whom it has the greatest responsibility. Lawmakers, thus, bear a continuing responsibility for the abortion license. The best legislative response to the state-supported killing of the innocent is to end it or, at least, to refuse recognition of it. A legislature can't divert an earthquake, but it can protect the least little ones, including the disabled among them. Not to do so is to betray the solidarity required by the law's raison d'etre to secure the common good.
Consequently, how, then, can one take part in a legislative act that is in contempt of the law's purpose?
Exactly. Any law has its first authority, its moral power, from God. If God's power is chiefly manifest in mercy, might not a legislator think that his or her authority, that is, moral power, is also chiefly manifest in mercy? Some distinctions are in order. What is at issue is not a mercy shown to the guilty. The disabled victims of abortion are innocent. It is rather a mercy shown to those whose lives others have wrongly made forfeit, and at the legislative level, public mercy stands vigilant against private breaches of solidarity. Incrementalism seldom lacks support, but the Christian legislator might well think that when both innocent life and the foundation of law are at stake, what we most need are actions which look to the final end itself. Yet no act is wiser, or more powerful, than an act of mercy. None is more ordered to the common good.
So the solidarists argue, might not the Christian legislator, committed to the common good, best show mercy by insisting that restrictive abortion bills do not exclude from protection the least little ones, those who are disabled or the victims of a special malice.
Even most incrementalists will now concede that the 1990 Orton Bill and the subsequent Commons fiasco was a price too high. But nevertheless the same negotiate/compromise/deal broker mind frame exists where any chance to grasp that piece of the loaf must be seized. And this is where Colin Harter, Nellie Gray, Francis Phillips, Spuck and all Solidaritists, including myself, argue no. Not only is it a repeatedly proven failed strategy, it's more so a gravely immoral one. There are prices we cannot, must not, pay. And this isn't an appeal to, as someone contemptuously dismissed it, an ideological purity. Ye gods! stating that no unborn child should be left behind or be considered less worthy than another is derided as if we were arguing over angels on pinheads rather than life or death. Nor is it, as someone fallaciously opined, squandering lives in the process.
One might contentiously retort how many lives have been squandered by a repeatedly doomed and failing incrementalist strategy and a contumacious recalcitrance in considering any other strategy.
I'm sorry, but it is cognitively dissonant to claim that negotiation and compromise regarding the fate of unborn lives are not part of incrementalism. They are. Rather than chipping away at the culture of death, there is a chipping away at one's conscience with toxic preference, utilitarianism, pragmatism, situationism and relativism. When one begins to ask what price a human life, one should instead be asking what price my soul.
Yet recently more outspoken pro-life activists have condemned outright the Solidaritism position as unconscionable, dangerous, scandalous, counterproductive and deliberately leading to the murder of unborn who could have been saved. It has been called almost evil in its pig-headed Pharisee-like seeking after ideological purity while the unborn are murdered.
If those at the front line in the fight against the culture of death can be so incredulously, defiantly, belligerently wrong, we're sunk. Until grassroots Catholicism starts listening to voices demanding solidarity for all, no exceptions, no compromise, and tells those allegedly speaking for them in the pro-life movement who are giving the wrong message, stop this, we have had enough. Our pro-life activists and lobbyists need to follow the suit of Spock, conceive their present strategy as an abject proven failure and realize volte-face away from failing incrementalism to truly pro-life solidaritism is now imperative. This is a war, and we're not merely losing each battle, we've lost ground at every attempt we've made.
And we need to ask ourselves why.
I beg, implore, plead with those pro-lifers who are defiantly incrementalist to reconsider their position and to now, at this 11th hour, turn to solidarity with all the unborn and fight for each and every one. Not one to be left behind. No exemptions. No compromises. Don't let reticence to admit past mistakes get in the way of doing the right thing now. Please. One cannot claim to believe one thing and then justify an action which exemplifies the direct opposite. The claim of making political concessions is quite misleading, because it implies we have something, anything, with which we can authentically bargain or trade off. We haven't.
So the claim that we have anything other than a collective moral will, reinforced with public support which provokes concessions from the opposing side, is automatically shown to be delusional misrepresentation of reality. Trying to make deals has failed, fails now and always will fail.
I understand the argument that half a loaf is better than nothing, and on paper it looks meaningful and commonsensical and the practical approach. But it implies we're involved in something akin to trade negotiations or arguing conditions for a peace treaty. We're not. We're abolitionists, and there's little point lying about it. Which is why it's ludicrous when we have Catholic politicians or media commentators claiming to be pro-life when they aren't. For example, they excuse abortion when the mother's life is at risk and lie about it, claiming it's acceptable under the conditions of double effect. The usual intellectual slight involves extrapolating double effect principles in ectopic pregnancy to the womb, or they agree with the right to abort in cases of rape or incest, or they equivocate away eugenic abortions or the destruction of life in IVF.
So your message to them is, stop lying, stop claiming to be pro-life when you aren't, and get out of your way. But the usual response to this message is, how dare anyone accuse anyone else of not being pro-life? Enough. Or accuse them of being pro-life light, especially when they are a fellow Catholic or someone who was dedicated and sacrificed themselves for the pro-life cause.
My response is that if you are willing to adopt the Caiaphas principle that some human lives are worth more than others or can be sold to by others, that some of our neighbors can be left behind if it benefits other neighbors. That is, anything which opposes the solidaritist principle. Then I'm sorry, but you're not pro-life, you're actually pro-choice in denial.
That's a bit harsh.
The truth sometimes is harsh. The days of being nice and talking in euphemisms and doublespeak are over. The incrementalists have had 46 years to prove their case, and millions have died while they failed at every juncture. And rather than increasingly more pro-life legislation, we have plummeted headlong into the culture of death.
Finally, on this issue, one blogger has argued that the pro-life cause is winning the battle over hearts and minds because scanning innovations like 4D imaging is repudiating the pro-abortionist claims that a fetus below the abortion limit is little more than tissue of slightly more moral equivalence than to a kidney stone. In other words, public opinion is gradually moving towards a reduction in the abortion limit based on seeing a human smiling, sucking their thumb, etc. In this scenario, an incrementalist strategic position may have some validity.
Unfortunately, this lady's understanding of contemporary pro-abortion strategy is both limited and anachronistic. Being fully aware of the risks of fetal images appealing to public heartstrings and challenging heretofore denial of the humanity of a fetus, pro-choice lobbyists, activists, academics and polemicists are moving away from the fetal development arguments to justify their position.
Thank you. You can explain in further in part 4.